There are essentially 4 different edit modes inside Pro Tools. By holding down the Option key and going through QWERTY 1 through 4, and you can also use 4 multiple times to switch between your relative and your grid mode. So let's talk about the Shuffle mode. Shuffle mode allows us to insert and remove time. So I can highlight this area of time and hold the C key down and then paste it over here. Now remember, I'm doing these one key actions because I have the AZ button turned on over here at the top right. So if I hit the Z key and then I highlight this and I hit delete or hit the X key to cut it, notice how it removes all my time and everything that follows that got pushed in. Now this is fine if you're working in 2, 4, 8, 16 bar phrases. But if you are trying to deal with audio that has to line up with other tracks, it's not going to work very well. Now you can also zoom in. I'm going to hit the T key and highlight this region, and I can cut this and paste it somewhere else. So I want to paste it there. Now let's say I want to do this with my grabber tool. I take my grabber tool and I can move the regions around, very much like shuffling a deck of cards. Very, very cool. So it just swaps its place there, for example. You're going to find yourself doing this when you're trying to reorder loops or phrases that you want to make them sound just different than their natural state. So this is a very creative way of working with your shuffle mode. Now if you're in other edit modes, for example slip, you can hold down the Command key and lock your shuffle mode. Now I cannot use Option QWERTY number 1 in order to go into shuffle mode. This just prevents you from making those bad mistakes. So let's say if I hit the delete key, you really want it to delete in place and not remove time. So this is probably one of the things that you're going to find yourself doing a lot, is just locking shuffle mode so that you don't make those horrible mistakes of moving things in time and it no longer lining up with the rest of the tracks. Now let's talk about spot mode. Spot mode allows us to place region data or any other data on a track to a location in time. So if I go into my grabber tool and go into Option 3, I can click on this and choose to place this, let's say at bar beat 3. So I just moved it to bar 10 beat 3. I can also choose to spot its end location. So let's say I want to spot this at beat 4. So very, very cool. Notice that it goes right at the very end of that position, right there. Now I can also do sync points. Sync points are from underneath the Regions menu, and we can go into removing and inserting sync points with the Command comma. So let's go ahead and put our cursor at this position right here, and I can do Command comma to insert a sync point. Well now if I take my grabber tool and click on it, it highlights the sync point and I can say I want this to be at 240. And I've moved that sync position right at the 240 tick point. I can also put my cursor at another location, do Command comma to reposition it, or take my grabber tool and go right at that triangle and move it around in time to reposition my sync point before I go into the spot dialog box. Very, very cool to work with. Notice that you can choose your time scale to be in minutes and seconds. So I could say I want this to be at 19 seconds. So I position this right at the 19-second value. If I switch this to minutes and seconds, you can see that this is now lining right at the 19-second value. Very interesting way of working with region data within your boundaries of a region. Now let's talk about grid. Grid allows you to position things either to an absolute or to a relative value. So let's put it on absolute, and I can go into my drop-down grid menu and choose a particular grid value. Eighths, for example. I can take this and move this by eighth values. Now one of the things you're going to find yourself doing all the time in grid mode is holding down the Command key to essentially clutch your grid into a momentary slip mode. So it's no longer working on that grid value. Now if I let go, it goes right to the grid, but if I hold the Command, it allows me to smoothly put it anywhere I want. I can go into my trim tool and do the same thing. I can trim it all the way out to my grid, or I can hold the Command and choose to be very smooth and precise with it. So you're going to find yourself working in that quite a bit. Now I call this clutching simply because of the analogy of working with a gear shift in a car. If you want to put it in neutral, you hit the clutch, and the car goes into neutral. And this allows you to freely move that position anywhere in time. Whereas if you're dealing with grid, you're now talking about the gears. It snaps to those grid values. So hopefully that analogy makes some sense there. Now let's go ahead and open up a session that's got material that is relative. I'm going to go ahead and not save that. And this particular session has a snare. If you look at it carefully, it's right at bar 1, beat 2, tick 27. Now if I play this, you'll notice that it sounds pretty cool. There's no real big issues with that snare being late. And this is what we call the groove element. When things are earlier or later in time, this gives it that feel of it pocketing in that particular feel of that song. So you don't always want to snap things always to the 100% mark. Now certain styles of music you probably want to do that. If you're dealing with dance or electronic music, certain styles of hip hop, you're going to press and push things right on the grid value. But other than that, you want to have things breathe a little bit. You may want to have your kick a little early here. You want to have your snare a little late here. And this just gives it that natural human feel instead of trying to press everything on the grid and make it not sound like a human played it. So if we zoom in on this and I want to move this around by, let's say, the 8th note, or the 16th in this case, I can move this, and notice when I snap it over, it does not go right to the 720 mark. It only goes to the 47, which is exactly 27 tick values past 720. So it moved a full 16th value over. Now let's go ahead and put this in 8th notes. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. You'll notice that it's right at 747, and I can move it over here. And now it's at 267. If I move it over here, it's at 747. So now it's a full beat from here to here. So hopefully that makes sense on the difference between absolute versus relative grid. Make sure you study this particular video multiple times and understand the differences between these different modes and their modifiers. Specifically, be very comfortable working in grid mode and just simply holding down the command key to momentarily make it work in slip mode. You're going to find yourself doing that quite a bit throughout your production.